Hi friends, Carl here again with Calm Survival, and this time we're actually looking at some things that have gone horribly wrong. So these can happen with most cooking systems, fuel stoves, and so it's why it's important to read the instructions and be pretty familiar with your equipment. Now, the first one is something that can happen to anybody. Yep, you can see that there. Now, these are very, they're reasonably thin aluminum pots. A lot of camping pots are in this sort of thickness range. And basically what happened was the user had set the pot on the stove on the heat with some oil in it to saute some onions. They stepped away for just a couple of minutes. The oil overheated, and as you can see here, the pattern of the aluminum melting is actually quite particular. Aluminum has an interesting property where it will remain solid basically until it kind of flash melts. Okay. And so this only took a few minutes, and obviously that pot was destroyed. Now, a similar thing can happen with stoves like the jet boil system. It's very important. They always have liquid in them. In general, with most camping pots, you don't really preheat them. You just start getting food into them as quickly as you can because they're so thin. Be them titanium, stainless steel, you don't really want to be overheating them. Okay. Now, this other one is peculiar to the Trangia system. Okay, this is a lower heat shield, and in wind, you want these vent holes to always be facing into the wind so that cooling air comes in, helps the flames come up. Now, this particular stove set was part of a circle of stoves that were all going, and this one was facing out of the wind. Now, what that means is that the wind rushing past is pulling the air out of these vents, and that meant that the flames were getting sucked down onto this aluminum, and then it melted and blew out. Now, this appears to be a catastrophic failure. It really wasn't, as in this could theoretically still be usable. Obviously, you wouldn't unless you absolutely had to, so it was removed from service. The reason I share this is because out of all of the video and all of the things I've seen about Trangias, this is not something I've seen brought up very often. It was very, very high wind day. They had nothing with which to block the wind. Even a small windbreak would have made a big difference and prevented this from happening. So pretty much worst case scenario to get a failure like this. But the stove itself, the pots in that case, everything else was still usable and could have been made to work. As you can see, it kind of became a bit of a shop joke. The only other thing that I've ever seen fail on a Trangia set is actually on a non-branded Trangia burner. And you can't see it on this one because this one is fine, but I have seen cracks form in here. Up here is not as important, but cracks down here, because this is a dual wall unit, there is some pressure that is built. It's a small amount. There is some pressure built in this outside area. And so if you have a vent here, it lowers the efficiency of the stove, but it puts heat and flame in an area that the rest of the design isn't really built to take. You want the heat all drawing out. The brass does get hot, but the heat management is actually pretty important to how these function. As I said, it was a non-Trangia branded one. We don't know where it came from. It was a bit of a generic, and so it just had a bit of a crack form in the brass over time. So there's a few failure modes of the Trangia, but unless you're parking a vehicle on them, they are pretty robust little units. Anyways, hope that gives you some more info. I've been Carl. This is Calm Survival. Stay safe.